Thank you all for coming today. It's a lovely day, and I hope that everyone is having a good start to their summer. Seems like this year is going fast once again. My name is Dr. Yvonne Johnson, and I'm happy to be here with you today talking about problem-based learning. And I work in the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning. My role involves focusing on pedagogy, andragogy, integration of technology, making sure that our courses are inclusive and equitable, and bringing various types of teaching techniques to our faculty and staff to make sure that NIU students and instructors have the best teaching and learning experiences possible. And I also teach in the College of Health and Human Sciences. I teach doctoral level research courses for an interdisciplinary health sciences doctoral cohort. And to begin community building, if you could all share your name and department, your unit, what you teach or what your role is at NIU, and if you've had any experiences with problem-based learning. And we have a small group today. You can raise your hand and share using your microphone if you would like, or you can share in the chat. That's fine too. We had a couple of people test their microphones. Okay, go ahead, Lindsay. Thank you.
So I'm Lindsay Vreeland. I am also I also work at Seidel now, but my role previously was as an instructor for the English department and for Center for the Study of Women, Gender, and Sexuality. I've been teaching 10 years now, and problem-based learning hasn't been something that I've been really intentional about using in my teaching practices. So I think that this is sort of a great opportunity for me to learn how to be intentional and learn how to guide other people to be intentional about using these practices.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. Go ahead, Janet.
Yes, I'm Janet Olson. I am in the communicative disorders program which is in the College of Health and Human Sciences. I have been teaching at NIU for 23 years, undergraduate and graduate level courses. Our coursework is very applied due to the nature of the field. And so I have been using case studies, bringing in, things from real world clinical experiences, but I'm not exactly sure that I'm doing problem-based learning. So I'm here to see if there are ways that I can improve that. And like Lindsay said, be a little more intentional in the teaching techniques that I'm using.
Great, thank you, Janet. Go ahead, Nicole.
Hi, my name is Nicole Sherman. I am a PhD student in the biology department. I am a biology education researcher, and my previous research and teaching experiences, I taught course-based undergraduate research experiences, which are bringing authentic research into the biology lab classroom. I think that is pretty problem-based as I understand it, but I'm looking to gain more tools to bring that kind of problem-based learning into the lecture classroom.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. And Bill Goldenberg teaches in the College of Music, and he says the problem is always creating the best performance that we can. Okay, so thank you all. It's always fun to have people from different disciplines. It provides a rich foundation for us to construct knowledge together. So thank you. Thank you for sharing. Okay, let's see. Janet, I see your hand is raised. Is there something else that you wanted to add?
Nope, I just never put it down. There we go.
Oh, no, that's fine. Okay, fine. Thank you. And so let's start talking about what problem-based learning is. And when you're using problem-based learning, you present the problem before the students have done any prep or before they've studied. So you're introducing the problem, and you use that to introduce the concepts and have them develop problem-solving skills. And your role as the teacher, the instructor, your role will be more as a facilitator, mentor, guide, resource as the students are going through this situation where they're wrestling with this multifaceted problem. So you're helping students learn how to learn. That's something that we do a lot. We talk about a lot in education in terms of pedagogy and andragogy. But it's not necessarily something that is thought of in all disciplines. So helping them learn how to learn, it's a student-centered kind of approach. You're working with small groups, and we use small groups in courses a lot. But this is a little different in terms of the approach, and we'll talk about some techniques that you can use. There's a lot of self-directed learning involved, and you want the students to discover, you're guiding them while they're discovering the knowledge and how to solve these problems independently and collaboratively as a group. So these students are working cooperatively, and they're addressing real world problems. And we had, people talk about the different types of problems, case studies, applied types of assignments that are done. And so this is an approach where they're given a problem, and then the learning occurs as they are learning about the problem and figuring out how to resolve that problem. And when you're selecting a problem for a problem-based learning activity, it needs to be something that is complex, that's messy and ill-structured. You don't want something with sort of a simple, this is the correct answer. You want something that's multifaceted and complex so that they have to really wrestle with how to address this problem. And the problem should be unfamiliar to the students. It needs to definitely be relevant to the course and what they're learning, but it shouldn't be something that they're already deeply steeped in terms of they say, oh, we do that all the time. Here's how we're going to resolve it. It needs to be something more unfamiliar to them. So we're providing them these complex problems to help them to stretch beyond that comfort zone. And to resolve these problems, they need to use inquiry-based techniques. They're going to have to ask questions. They're going to need to research. We have a lot of complex problems in our world today that they're dynamic situations. There might be a situation where there's a resolution that's viable now, but maybe if the situation changes, the resolution would be something that needs to be adapted. So you just want to make sure that it's a multifaceted, complex problem. But we don't have any shortage of those these days. And when you're going through as that mentor and facilitator, helping the students to move through this problem, you're scaffolding them. And we do that quite a bit in education, in our teaching. We start by providing more supports, and we gradually provide less supports and structure so that the students are becoming more and more self-directed as they become more comfortable and gain more knowledge in this whole problem-based learning approach. And if you think about the problem-based learning continuum, in the beginning, their autonomy, if you look at that, the left axis where it connects with the right axis, then you see that in the beginning of the course, there's lower levels of autonomy because the students don't have the knowledge. They're not comfortable with problem-based learning yet. So you're starting them with more structure, and you're going to gradually take that away. So that's another way to show that scaffolding, how we move through that in the class. And there are different models that represent problem-based learning, and I'll show you several of those today. There's always engagement. It's a highly active type of learning activity, and we know that active learning helps students to, it helps them to reach higher levels of critical thinking. It helps them to take their knowledge as they're inquiring and investigating and evaluating all these different aspects of the problem, justifying some of the resolutions that they are finding, and communicating that information. It's the type of a problem, it's the type of learning activity that is going to, they're going to remember longer. They'll remember it. If you think back to when you were in courses and you had these complex, multifaceted, applied types of learning activities, you remember them for years and years and years. And so these things have a significant impact on students' learning, and they can build upon that. It goes into their long-term memory. They can build upon that throughout their education and their careers. So they're very powerful learning experiences. Another model of problem-based learning brings in observing. They might be observing a situation. They need to define the problem. You know, what's happening here? What are questions that need to be answered here? What do we know? What do we not know? What are the expectations of this group? What are our expectations in terms of resolution? How is this group that's working on this problem, how are they going to carry out this study to figure out how to address the problem? Looking at the results, then reflecting, and reflecting we know is also very powerful in terms of taking students to higher levels of thinking, to creating new knowledge, and helping them to remember that information that they constructed for many years to come. And then communicating what they've found and how they've discovered it with others in the course. And so you'll have these small groups that are addressing the problems. And then there are these different phases. You can have them, all going through the phases at the same time. And then they can share the processes that they're using with all of the other groups. And then you can have discussions about that, and they can learn from the different activities of the other groups. So it's very powerful in practice. And there's another way to portray the problem-based learning process. This one includes listing some hypotheses. What do you know? We talked about what do you know? What do they not know? And some of the challenges we have sometimes with groups is students aren't exactly sure, what needs to be done. So this model includes having them develop a list of what needs to be done, gathering information. It has those similar things as presenting the findings, reflecting, etc. But you can see each one of these models is a little different. There are definitely some similarities with the research process. But in this case, we're giving them this multifaceted, complex problem, and we're using it in this problem-based approach instructional technique. So a couple of you have talked about that you've used case studies and things. After hearing a little bit about problem-based learning, have you used any problems kind of like this in your courses so far? Go ahead, Janet.
I think after listening to the description, not really, especially in terms of presenting sort of the problems before we've had any content or discussion. I think I tend to insert them in. And then the process is somewhat similar, but it's not exactly what you're doing.
Yep, that makes sense. Yes, thank you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the instructor role in the problem-based learning instructional approach. You are going to identify and provide this ill-defined, unstructured, complicated problem to the students, and something that helps with making this successful is setting benchmarks. And we talked about that scaffolding process a bit. So as the instructor, you'll set a project due date, but it's important to have those milepost markers throughout the timeline that you're going to be having them address this problem. And so these are longer term projects because, as we said, the problem is unfamiliar to the students. The process, when you start using it, is probably unfamiliar to them. So putting in those benchmarks is going to help them to be able to guide their learning and plan their learning and studying their group projects and things. And so that helps quite a bit. And I do that with projects that are not problem-based learning as well, because in universal design, we know that if we provide students those interim benchmarks, it's going to help them move along the process and helps avoid that trying to do everything at the last minute type situation. And as the instructor, you're going to be asking them questions. So let's say that you have given this problem to the students, and so you're asking them to go through one of these different models that we've looked at. And so you're going to ask them, okay, so how did you define the problem? And so maybe you have 4 groups in the class or however many groups. And then, each group will say how they've defined the problem. And then you'll ask those open-ended probing questions to get them to think more deeply about something, maybe think about an aspect of the problem that they didn't necessarily pick up on, things like that, which we do all the time in classes. It's just that it's, as Lindsay had said, it's more intentional in a process way with the problem-based learning. So you're asking them about their thinking. How did they identify this problem? What pieces of information did they look at? How did they know this was the problem? These are multifaceted, complex situations. And so maybe a couple of the groups come up with, maybe one of the groups says, you know what, we think that the environmental aspect of this situation is the biggest problem. So we're going to really focus on that. And then maybe one of the other groups says, well, we agree that the environmental aspect is a challenge, but we think that the funding is really the overriding issue. And so we're going to start digging into that. And so you're asking them, okay, so how did you come up with it? What was it about this problem that made you come to this conclusion? You're going to provide group protocols and some guidelines for them to work with in their groups, and we'll look at some of those. Monitor their learning and adjust levels of challenge. So you want to make sure that the problem is unfamiliar. You also want to make sure that the problem is, it's something that's realistic, that they could achieve the goals of this project within the time frame that you set and within the level of the course that they're in. So clearly you're going to have different levels of challenge for an undergraduate course than you have for a graduate course. So you have different levels of challenge for freshman and sophomore students than you would have for seniors who've been in the program for a while. Because we know from research that if the problem is so hard that they don't feel that they can be successful, then you can have some possibly negative impacts of that, where students might pull back and they might say, oh, there's no way, we can do this. It's just too hard. So you want to adjust the levels of challenge. And so one thing that you might do is some sort of a pre-assessment level of knowledge type of like Qualtrics survey or something, to see what students know about an issue that you're thinking about giving them, to make sure that you're giving them something that's a challenge but not too far down the road that they really couldn't handle in the course. And so you want to keep them moving, and those benchmarks help, and you can set in check-ins with you, manage the group dynamics. If anything comes up, you can facilitate that, give them pointers about that. You'll have different types of assessments that you use. And it's also important to involve students in the planning and questioning process. So you might be questioning, but also provide them the opportunity to ask other groups questions. And we also know from experience and research that when students are involved in planning and setting up, maybe you can have them involved in setting up benchmarks. Say, okay, do you think that it's workable if we have benchmark touch points every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks or whatever? And so when students are involved in those decisions, then they are more committed and they feel like they're a part of the process. And they tend to engage and feel like they're partners in the process as opposed to just being told, these are the benchmark dates that we're going to have for the course, things like that. And then for the students, they need to read and analyze the situation, the scenario, come with what kind of hunches they have about this problem, hypotheses. Think as a group, okay, what do we know? We know these pieces of information, but that's not enough for us to solve that problem. What don't we know? And as a group, so maybe we have 5 group members, what needs to be done? Who needs to do it? How are we going to come up with those types of roles in the group? They come up with a problem statement. They need to be able to justify that. They've evaluated all of the data, and they need to go out and collect information. And so in the group, each person can have a different role, and they can have expectations, and they can be responsible for bringing back and sharing this information with the group, and then they can decide what's next. They'll present their findings to the whole course, there are several groups presenting these findings, and then reflect. And they reflect as individuals, they can reflect as a small group, and then as the whole group. So it kind of it builds on, they build on each other's knowledge and experience, and each group there will be similar things that they find, but it's all also fun that when each person brings in their own knowledge, expertise, background, perspectives, values, and so each one is going to have some different insights as well. And so it's really a rich opportunity for constructing knowledge and helping them to learn how to analyze a problem with how are they going to really address this problem. And so they'll have skills that they can use as their coursework gets more complicated and throughout their careers. And so and I'll send you all this information so that you have it. So key points to think about are they need to clearly define the problems, what they see, and then what are sub-problems. I had mentioned an example where one of the groups thought that the environment was a big challenge. Another group thought that the budget was a big challenge. Okay, so what are the sub-problems related to that, and why did they come up with that? And both groups could probably come up with robust arguments for their different approaches to the problem. And so initially, they're going to analyze the information that you've shared with them. And then as they gain more information, they've asked questions, they've collected research, they've maybe talked to experts. And so then their understanding becomes more multifaceted. And so after that, they might say, well, maybe the budget really is the biggest issue here, or maybe the environment is the issue, or maybe it's something else, the structure of the way the governmental oversight works related to this problem or something like that. Another aspect is that they need to list the knowledge that they have, the skills they have, And when they're talking about the skills, that's where a group can be a rich source of power for this situation, because maybe somebody in the group is really good at research, or somebody in the group is really good at technology. And so you talk to them about um, what's the best use of talents in the group. And is there any talent, in this group that we don't have that we need? And maybe they'll ask you as a professor for something like that. Maybe they need some access to some kind of SPSS or something. So they might ask you for additional resources. So you're going to think of goals for this project. What are those key factors that you really want them to get out of this? And they're not exactly those standard learning objectives, but they are, maybe you want them to really be able to analyze the information and be able to present a clear problem statement. So maybe that's one of your goals or quasi-learning objectives. Or maybe you want them to be able to learn how to take this multifaceted task and figure out how to work with a team to successfully complete this task. Or maybe it's related to some specific complex discipline content. But you really have to think about that. What's your goal? What are those main goals that you want to come out of this project? And then there are a lot of benefits of problem-based learning. It motivates students. They get really excited about it. It's a big task, but they see that you've assigned them authentic. One of you mentioned authentic learning experiences. So they see, okay, this is an authentic problem related to my field, and so they can really see the value of that. It helps them to develop higher order thinking skills, and the reflective aspects and your guidance and benchmarks help them to learn how to learn. You can build in those open-ended reflective questions to help them to gain insights about their learning. And so you could say, how did you identify the main problem for this project? What pieces of information did you use? How did you validate that? Who did you talk to? Was there anything you missed? Was there anything that you are going to do differently next time? What worked well? What would they do the same? And so just those simple open-ended probing questions can help them to kind of illuminate their own learning, which they might not have really thought about. It helps them to, as you're going through this project, you're gradually taking away some of that scaffolding. So as they get better at working with the group, at discovering things, at researching, then they can be more self-directed. So they're gaining those stronger self-directed learning skills. And it also helps them as they're working in a group to be responsible, delegate, and all of those things will help them as they continue their college and their careers. some of the disadvantages are that it it can take time. Students, you need to create an environment where they feel safe and supported, so that they feel that they have the efficacy to be able to really succeed in this complex project. Um, you need to come up with appropriate problems. So it's not something that you would just put together at the last minute. It takes some time to put together. And you also want to have assessments throughout the project. So that's something that you would want to develop as well. Okay, so we've talked about different aspects of problem-based learning. We talked about the complex problems. We've talked about the role of the professor, instructor, and the students. And thinking about your discipline, how could you identify a problem that might be appropriate for a problem-based learning instructional type technique? Go ahead, Janet.
Well, I've just been thinking about some of the assignments that I use, and a lot of times, because we're talking about, here is a profile of someone that you might be working with, and then you plan out the various things that are going to happen. I'm just not sure that it's as complex a problem as you're proposing.
Well, is there a way to make it a little more multifaceted?
Probably.
Or take away some of the information maybe, so that they don't have as much information, and then they would have to discover some of that maybe?
Well, we do, I do give them things that are a little bit messy, and we do talk about, well, what do you know? What do you not know?
Mm-hmm.
And how are you going to find out what you don't know?
Mm-hmm.
And that has been challenging for them.
Yes, yes.
They
Mm-hmm.
they want to know what they need to know. But it's really, again, thinking about, here's the information and the situation you have. How are you going to go about problem solving?
Mm-hmm. Well,
So
and
I'll have to think about some of that,
mm-hmm.
because often there isn't a right answer or a wrong answer. There are multiple ways to get to where they need to go.
Yes.
So I'll have to think about that a little bit more.
Yes, yes. And maybe you could change the context of the problem that they're given, or the people. Like, what's an example of a situation that you give students to say, okay, what do you know and what do you not know?
Yeah, I could try that.
But yeah, it's and I'll send everyone this information, so you can kind of think about it. Yeah, but you have, the some of the aspects, and that's the thing. We might not deliberately go through this whole process in our courses, but you probably have different aspects of the problem-based learning, like what do you know, what do you not know, or a team project or something like this. But
Yeah,
this is,
yeah, I do. I have reflection and some things like that. It's just maybe I haven't thought of it as intentionally as this is laid out.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yep. And it would have to be something that is, really significant and authentic for their what they need to learn. So it's an instructional technique. I mean, it's not appropriate for every course,
Hmm.
but it's definitely powerful for the ones that it does fit with.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, I did one semester have, well, I've been doing this the last couple semesters and it has been painful for them. Um, but I think by the end they were appreciative. Because we
Mm-hmm.
did, I had them kind of, these are graduate students, them create the
Mm-hmm.
problem in terms of some kind of service delivery model that they wanted to, something they wanted to do when they were finished with school. I want to go out and start this program. How are you going
Mm-hmm.
to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I first did it, I wasn't very organized. um,
It's learning for everybody.
Yes, I would agree. I learned, I think, more than they did. But it was very fun to see what they all came up with by the end. But
Mm-hmm.
they were like, "Well, I don't know anything about that. I can't do a financial plan." I'm like, "Yes, you can. Let's
Mm-hmm.
figure out how to do it."
Yeah. Yeah, and there's that support on the side that you were providing. Yep, exactly. That's awesome. Those are powerful experiences, Janet.
I hope so. I'm just hoping
Okay.
to learn how to do them a little better.
It's it's a process. Each time we do it, it gets a little more refined. Yep. Okay, thank you. Okay, and then thinking about different ways to identify a problem, find a problem, you can talk to the class. If they're identifying problems, then again, they're invested in the process. They think, oh wow, we're going to be addressing a problem that we suggested, or colleagues, textbooks, readings, what's on the news, what's on TikTok and all these different places that we're immersed in these days. Um, a lot of different disciplines use simulations. Ethical dilemmas are good ones for problem-based learning. Several people have talked about case studies, legal disputes. There's many facets of those, and they come up in every discipline, public policy. So there are a wide variety of different places that you can look to get ideas for problem-based learning. The ones that are authentic and that they're interested in can be very motivating and valuable. And the students, they might not realize at the time how much they've learned from it. I think we can probably all think about educational experiences that we had that years later, we think, oh, this is what we were supposed to learn in that project, or wow, that really is still applicable today. And that's what problem-based learning type of projects will be. And then evaluating problem-based learning, and that's another challenge that instructors and professors face is, okay, so I'm going to give them this complex challenge, and so how do I grade that? And I will share, there's a set of rubrics that were developed by the American Association of Colleges and Universities, and they were developed by a, a group of pedagogy experts, people in different disciplines, and there's 16 of them, and some of the different rubrics are for critical thinking, problem solving, communication skills, different skills like that. And so I'll share that link with you all, and you can look at the rubrics, and they are available to, you can just kind of get ideas from them and then tweak them to what might fit your course. And so you don't have to start from scratch, because we know, there's been a lot of research put into this. So you know that you're building from a resource that has been well thought through. And so you don't have to use the whole thing, but you could get ideas for your own ways that you could assess these projects. And so one of the rubrics, I just have a screen capture here, it's for critical thinking. And so they talk about, each one of the rubrics has one page that is and this one is for critical thinking. And it also has a rubric with different benchmark levels. So this one has explanation of issues, and there's a description of, if they've done a really good job, that they get the capstone 4, or benchmark 1 is that they haven't as fully identified or explained the issues. And so the student's position is another one of those components of the rubric, their perspective. What kind of thesis hypothesis did they come up with? Evidence, we always want to be able to share evidence and to be able to explain why that supports whatever position they're taking. So I wanted to just kind of give you an idea of what those rubrics look like. You might use something more informal, just kind of jot down, did they, have limited, adequate, proficient, excellent, whatever, in terms of the different levels of how they address the problem. But it's a different depiction of how you might kind of review, maybe in the class, as opposed to more for the final project. It might be more of a formal type of rubric. And for the active learning techniques, problem-based learning is, it goes way up on the active learning continuum. And so those types of activities have been shown to have powerful impact on students' learning, and have a lasting impact. Okay, so Janet had, let's see, idea about rubrics for groups. I can look into some information for that, Janet, and send it to you. They don't specifically have it in this particular workshop, but I can definitely get that and send it to you. Okay, you're welcome. And then James Rim says that what students learn about collaboration, different approaches to a problem, cooperation, and responsibility makes their learning in PBL courses multi-sided, richer, and in that way deeper. And again, I would encourage you to think about those types of powerful experiences that you had in your own education. And then just thinking about problem-based learning, does anybody have an idea of how you think problem-based learning might how it might fit in your class, how it might benefit your students or benefit you as an instructor. We have people from different disciplines here, so it's kind of interesting to hear how it can be applied in different disciplines. Go ahead, Lindsay.
So I have traditionally had students do a research paper. A lot of the English faculty do for what is ENGL 203. They have like a research capstone sort of thing. And often it's a group project. And traditionally, students would choose their own project, but maybe they would choose from like a general topic or whatever. But now I'm thinking something along the lines of just giving them more freedom to come up with something, maybe controlling like, okay, it needs to be a current issue or it needs to be an issue on campus or something like that. I know other people in the department do that, but just giving them more choice might encourage them to be more interested in the topic and more involved in the research process, rather than, a lot of students just sort of like come up and want us to do the research for them or help them find resources, which is fine, to help that process along. But maybe they'll be more they'll have more agency over it.
Yep, that's a great idea. Yes, thank you. And Nicole, you had your hand up. I can't hear you, Nicole.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, there you go.
In biology, we have a lot of pre-med and allied health folks. So I think a benefit would definitely be increased engagement and actual practical application. They can start thinking about some of the issues they're going to face once they're out as practitioners. I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yes, yes, because that's going to be an authentic type of problem. And yeah, that's a great idea. Yep. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, I'll just tell you that I think we do a lot of that all the time. And actually, the students create their own problem, and then we can comment on it. So like when I teach accompanying class, which is people playing together in a small group of 2 or 3, 4 people, they can give a performance, and then I ask the students themselves what's a problem, so if they're having trouble with a certain rhythm or something, and we can all make suggestions, everyone in the class. Another example would be when you play with piano, and you have one violin and one cello. Piano is a big instrument and can be very loud. And so the balance between the instruments, how loud they're playing, needs to be adjusted often. Sometimes it's hard to even know that when you're one of the players. So everyone listens and then gives them suggestions about how to fix if the piano is covering the other instruments, for example. And everyone has to decide if it's a problem for them, because music is so subjective in many ways. But and they have to suggest how to fix it. So, like if the piano is covering other instruments, often they'll say, "Oh well, the violin has to play louder. It's not loud enough." But they often will forget that the piano could also play softer. So you have to adjust things, and there could be many solutions to a problem like that.
Oh, that's awesome. Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's great. So you're doing that all the time. Great. Okay, thank you, Bill. Okay, great. So it's always interesting to hear the different disciplines and how the techniques can be applied in them. So thank you each for sharing. I appreciate that. And in summary, so we talked about the importance of having an ill-structured problem that has more than one solution. And so problem-based learning assists in skill development. We've seen the different skills that develop when they're working through a complex problem. And students are given guidelines to approach that problem-solving process. And you, as the instructor, are facilitating and coaching. And we talked about some different ways to assess performance for the problem-based learning technique. So I want to remind everyone that our center is available for support. We're always happy to help. So get a hold of us if you need some support. And appreciate your engagement and participation, and hope to connect with you all during the summer. And I will send out the information about the workshop later this afternoon. So thank you all and have a great summer.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Bye. Thank you.